I was 10 years old when I played my first official Nintendo game. I had always known about Mario and I always wanted a Nintendo console, but it wasn't until I got my Game Boy Advance with Link's Awakening that I was able to play a Nintendo game. Ever since then, I've poured probably hundreds of hours into many of Nintendo's games, everything from Super Mario 64 to the recently released Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. 6 years ago, I had the vision of documenting Nintendo's histories in video format. Today, we'll begin that journey. Welcome to Nintendo The History. Today we're going to talk all about the beginning of Nintendo's history, starting in the days of playing cards and love hotels, and eventually making it all the way to Nintendo Switch and beyond. We begin our story in Kyoto, Japan. Located in the central part of the island of Honshu, Kyoto currently has a population of over 1.5 million people and was formerly the imperial capital of Japan more than 1,000 years ago. It's now the capital city of the Kyoto Prefecture and is home to a small Japanese company that we all know and love, Nintendo. Originally called Nintendo Koppai, Nintendo was founded over 100 years ago on September 23, 1889 by Fusahiro Yamauchi. The name Nintendo has a few different translations that includes Heaven Blesses Hard Work, In Heaven's Hands, and The Hall of Entrusting Heaven, but most people will recognize the most common translation as Leave Luck to Heaven. As we know, Nintendo didn't start as a video game company. Instead, they started as a playing card company. In fact, the first video game didn't come out until almost 70 years later in 1958, and they weren't on the market until the 1970s with Atari's Pong. Nintendo produced and marketed what were called Hanafuda cards. Hanafuda is literally translated as flower cards. The game can basically be considered as a more complicated version of a children's matching game. These cards were all handmade, and Nintendo was gaining tons of popularity through them. However, this popularity was mainly due to gambling, which the government had laws against. Either way, using basic economics, due to the high demand of cards, Nintendo had to continue producing more and more of them. So Yamauchi started hiring assistants to mass produce them. By 1907, Nintendo began making partnerships. Their first partnership was with Japanese company Japan Tobacco and Salt Corporation. Remember kids, smoking isn't good for you. It makes you look like this. And trust me, you don't want to look like this. Smoke weed instead. This partnership basically allowed Nintendo to sell their cards in cigarette shops all across Japan, which meant even more distribution. In this same year, Fusahiro's daughter Tei Yamauchi would marry Sekiro Kaneda. 20 years later, in 1927, Sekiro's grandson Hiroshi Yamauchi was born. Hiroshi was a very important president in the company and would be the one that would take Nintendo in the direction that we know of today. Unfortunately for Fusahiro Yamauchi, he never did have a son, which meant that nobody could take over the family business. Following common Japanese tradition, he decided to adopt his son-in-law Sekiro. In 1929, Fusahiro retired from Nintendo and allowed Sekiro to take over the company as the new president. And by 1933, Sekiro established a joint venture with another company and renamed it Yamauchi Nintendo & Company. In 1947, Sekiro established a distribution company called Metafuko Company Limited to distribute their ever so popular Hanafuda cards, along with several other brands of cards that Nintendo had introduced to the world. Sekiro Yamauchi, much like his father-in-law, also only had daughters, so his son-in-law Shikanojo Inama, renamed Shikanojo Yamauchi, was adopted in the family. Shikanojo never became president though because he left his family. There's no telling what the reason behind it was, but either way it was a pretty shitty thing to do. So instead, Shikanojo's son Hiroshi had to be brought up by his grandparents. Later, Hiroshi Yamauchi would take over the company. In 1949, Hiroshi Yamauchi was attending Waseda University in Tokyo, but after his grandfather died from a stroke, he decided to leave the university so that he could take up the position as president of Nintendo. Interesting enough, he would only take this position if he was the only person in his family in the company. I mean, they do warn people of working with their family, so Hiroshi's older cousin was fired and he began his position as president. In these early days with Hiroshi as president, due to his young age and lack of experience, most of the employees in the company didn't take him seriously. Not too long after he took over, there was even a strike by many of the factory employees who resented him. Instead of caving in though, he asserted his authority and fired many of the longtime employees who had questioned his authority in the first place. I wouldn't say that this is the best way to run a company, but you do what you gotta do. In 1951, Nintendo saw yet another name change, this time to Nintendo Playing Card Company Limited. In 1953, Nintendo did their first of many innovations by being the first company in Japan to produce playing cards from plastic. These type of innovations would be made due to Hiroshi's notoriously imperialistic style. He was the only one that would judge new products, and only if it appealed to him would he push it to the market. In 1956, Hiroshi visited the US to engage in talks with the United States Playing Card Company. Yamauchi was shocked to find that the world's biggest company in his business was relegated to using such a small office. This was a turning point for him. He then realized that the playing card industry had some big limitations. In an event to get even more popular, in 1959, Nintendo struck a deal with Disney which would allow them to use Disney's characters on Nintendo's playing cards. Previously, Western playing cards were regarded as something similar to Hanafuda and Mahjong, a device for gambling. By tying playing cards to Disney and selling books explaining the different games one could play with the cards, Nintendo could sell the product to Japanese households outside of the gambling market. This tie-in was a success, and the company sold at least 600,000 card packs in a single year. Due to this success, in 1962, Yamauchi took Nintendo public, listing the company in the Osaka Stock Exchange Second Division. Following this success in 1963, Nintendo Playing Card Company Limited was renamed once again to Nintendo Company Limited, taking out the playing card. Nintendo now began to experiment in other areas of business using this newly injected capital. During this period of time between 1963 and 1968, Nintendo set up a taxi company called Daiya, a love hotel chain, sexy, a food company which sold instant rice similar to instant noodles, and several other things, including a vacuum cleaner named Chiritori, which would later appear as a two-player game in WarioWare Inc. Mega Micro game in 2003. All these ventures eventually failed, except their sweet spot, toy making, where they had some earlier experience from selling playing cards. And you thought that Amiibos was Nintendo's first step into toys. In 1964, while Japan was experiencing an economic boom due to the Tokyo Olympics, the playing card business had reached its saturation point. Japanese households stopped buying playing cards, and the price of Nintendo stock fell from 900 yen to 60 yen. Now this was about $9 to 60 cents back in the day, which is now the equivalent of $70, dropping to $5 in today's economy. In other words, a very, very bad drop. Riddled with debt, Nintendo struggled to survive in the Japanese toy industry. It was still small at this point and dominated by already well-established companies such as Bandai and Tomy. Because of the generally short product life cycle of toys, the company always had to come up with new products. This was the beginning of a major new era for Nintendo. In 1965, Nintendo hired Gunpei Yokoi as a maintenance engineer for the assembly line. However, Yokoi soon became famous for much more than his ability to repair conveyor belts. In 1966, Hiroshi was observing a Hanafuda factory when he noticed an extending arm which was made by one of their maintenance engineers for his own amusement. This was none other than Gunpei Yokoi. Released as the Ultra Hand, it would become one of Nintendo's earliest toy blockbusters, selling over 1 million units. Seeing that Yokoi had promise, Hiroshi pulled him off of assembly line work and created a brand new department called Games and Setup. Yokoi was set to man the department for research and development. Due to his electrical engineering background, it soon became apparent that Yokoi was quite adept at developing electronic toys. These devices had a much higher novelty value than traditional toys, which allowed Nintendo to charge a higher price margin for each product. This began the golden age of Nintendo's imagination, and it was all thanks to Yokoi. He later went on to develop many other toys, including the 10 billion barrel puzzle, a baseball throwing machine called the Ultra Machine, and a love tester.
ラブテスターを使って握手をすればメーターが2人の愛情度を表す。欲しいなこれ。おかしいなちょっと。
Another invention of his, in collaboration with Masayuki Uemura from Sharp, was the Nintendo Beam gun game, the precursor to the NES Zapper, which was the first commercially available light gun for home use. In 1972, Nintendo released the Elaconga, one of the first programmable drum machines. It could play pre-programmed rhythms from disc-shaped punch cards, which could be altered or programmed by the user to play different patterns. These were the ideas that Nintendo needed. These were the ideas that brought Nintendo's stock back up, and it was also the beginning of some of the best names in video games: Hiroshi Yamauchi and Gunpei Yokoi. Right around the corner, the world was just about ready for Nintendo's hands on arcade games. But I guess we'll have to hear more about that in the next episode. Next time on Nintendo the History, the arcade games you've probably never heard of, a gunman with no civilization skills, and Mr. Game & Watch before he was flipping flapjacks on Smash Bros. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Nintendo the History. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a remaster of an original episode that I did like 4 years ago on a different channel. So if you heard some of this material, you probably have if you've seen the old channel. Then I'm sorry it's really familiar, but I did take a lot more time in editing it and trying to make it more presentable. Also, there's not as much comedy in this episode because it is so information heavy, but there will be plenty of changes throughout the new season, and there will be different moments in the new episodes that I'm really excited about. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. I do all kinds of different videos that are nerd related, including live streaming over here. And if you are wealthy, then let me suggest you hit that patreon.com/Zack Snyder Productions. Just it rolls off the tongue. Hit me up with some money, or buy the merch. I got this nice hoodie. I really like it. You should go get it. It's pretty dope. Anyways, thank you again for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.